Let's now join Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director of AATF, as he engages a panel of those who would know what ought to be the place of the African woman in agriculture.
Thank you very much, Joe. Women make essential contributions to the agricultural and rural economies in all developing countries. Their role vary considerably between and within regions and are changing rapidly in many parts of the world where economic and social forces are transforming the agricultural sector. Rural women often manage complex households and pursue multiple livelihood methods. According to a 2015 AfDB report, an average of 62% of economically active women in Africa work in agriculture and play a key role in food production and provision for their households. However, these female farmers produce less than their male counterparts because they own less than 2% of the world's land, with a mere 10% of agricultural credit access. The gender gap in agriculture is generally associated with limited access and control over innovative agricultural technologies, extension services, education, financial services, and rural employment. Women also have limited participation in agricultural research and development policies, interventions, and decision-making, and are underrepresented in outstanding farmers' organizations. On this week's episode of KIKAO, we examine the crucial role played by women in agriculture and how Africa can unlock their untapped potential to boost food production. My name is Dr. Canisius Kanangire. I'm the Executive Director of AATF, and on my distinguished panel this week, I have a renowned academic and practitioner, Professor Ruth Oniang'o, who is the founder, Rural Outreach Program, Africa, and 2017 recipient of Africa Food Prize, and Mashumba Ruramiso, CEO and founder, Nandi Africa. You are welcome.
Thank you.
I think what I have just said is not enough to really tell who you are and what you are doing currently. May you please take a few seconds and tell us what, beyond the food price and the being an academic, a practitioner in agriculture, who you are currently in this theme we are developing today. CEO of Nandi, but what are you doing? Who are you for us today in this KIKAO? Let me start with Professor.
Right now I'm running for parliament. Our constituency, Buteres in Western Kenya.
We wish you very good.
Yes, yeah, I was there before, 15 years ago as a nominated member. And I really took on the issue of agriculture and food. And we passed some legislation, some acts. We even had the Right to Food Act passed. But for some reason, it was never executed. So my NGO right now, Rural Outreach Africa, with German funding, we are trying this out to put it into practice in one county of Vihiga in Western Kenya. So my whole life really has been around food, even as a mother and as a grandmother now. Food for me is the first medicine. Food for me is the most basic human right. Yes. If you can't have food, then there's nothing you're talking about.
Yes.
You can't talk about development. And the reason why I prefer to focus on women is that, you know, we are the ones who worry about what everybody is going to eat. But we are forgotten completely. It's like the food issue is everybody's business because we want to eat, but it's nobody's responsibility.
I think it should be our primary responsibility to all of us, because that is where you have the health issues addressed, and poverty, the real poverty is when you cannot feed your
and
your
huge
people
potential
correctly.
for this continent, you know, but it has remained potential.
Yeah.
I mean, I started working on
Now
this
we need to unlock
when I
it.
was below her age, and I'm aging now, and you know, it's still the same issues we're talking about. There's something we are not doing right.
Let's hear how she takes the baton and, and now unlock the potential.
And unlock it.
Yes,
yeah.
Ramisha.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you so much. So for me, I am passionate about my community. I'm passionate about food security. I'm passionate about sustainable farming. You know, in Africa, a lot of us, we have been farming, like she mentioned, and still the results you can't see in many areas. There's still food insecurity, there's still hunger, there's still poverty. And I believe that we haven't really harnessed technology enough. So I'm a champion for sustainable farming. I'm a champion for looking at different farming in a way where we're incorporating knowledge, local knowledge, and also teaching our farmers how to farm better. My organization, Monandi Africa, that is what we do. We support women on the farm, access knowledge, because something I realized as a farmer myself is that there isn't access to knowledge for women farmers on the ground, sometimes in local language. You find that a lot of these women are left behind because they would not have the same education. So it's now looking at how can we educate women farmers to be able to understand farming in local language, in easy methods, and also demonstrating and pushing the importance of conservation farming. This is also using of no-till equipment, the importance of even like right now, like you mentioned, we are going through so many challenges, some of them geopolitical, where even fertilizer prices are triple. What other methods are there that we can use in order for us to still remain sustainable?
I think that is very interesting. We need to be concerned about food and make sure that food is available for our people, and we cannot produce it if we don't look at the method to produce sustainably and also use knowledge and technology. I think it is very good. Now let's come to the African landscape. How do you paint the participation of women in the agricultural production sector today in Africa?
They do all the production. They worry about what everybody else is going to eat, but they are kept away from decision making, from policy making. They are kept away from the money. And you know, I've been around enough to know all the conferences that take place, and then resources are committed to Africa. And sometimes they call me. They say, Ruth, aren't you happy now? I say, no, until I see it on the ground, until I see it on the smallholder farmer, and until I see it on the woman farmer. And let me also say that it's not in the whole of Africa that you have women-only farming on the ground as smallholder farmers. I've been to other countries, specifically, where it is man and woman also farming. So it all depends on the cultural setting, but to a large extent, yes, it is woman, but you know, everybody else eats, but the woman does the work. So I think we just do too much talking. Yeah, Edie, we do, it's just too much talking, but very little action. I can tell you that as someone who has been in this sector for a long time. So until we are intentional, very intentional, and supporting and putting, you know, resources where our mouth is in policy terms, and even the donor community, because it's very romantic to just talk about, oh, Africa is women who produce the food. It sounds very sexy and nice, but we don't put the other resources.
Yes.
And what women need, by the way, I've seen, is not even a whole lot, because the technologies she's talking about, very critical. The knowledge transfer, it needs to be done in a way that suits the woman. That suits the woman. She cannot be leaving her home, going to some center, to some training, staying there for 3 days. What meantime is happening to her family? Because she's the primary nurturer. And we have to put that into account. Yeah, and I don't see that having happened. Yeah.
Professor, you said women are on the the shamba, the farm,
Yes.
the farming land.
Yes, yeah.
They do all the work.
Yes, yeah.
And indeed we know they contribute to actually very much, a huge contribution to food production.
Yes, yeah.
They are also in food processing, in food, how do I call it? Selling food and
Yes, yeah.
So they are in all those
Trading,
different
yes, yeah.
areas. They work a lot. But what we know is that at the end of the day, they are not necessarily the prime beneficiary of what comes from the
land.
farming, the farming farming business. So this is the situation. Why is that way? What are those factors, those challenges which hinder the women to really benefit of that production and that work they do on the farm?
It goes back to education.
Education.
You know, I live in rural Zimbabwe. And, you know, on a normal day, you can just walk in the rural areas and you find a young girl with a baby on her back. Young girl, maybe like not more than 10 years, with a baby on her back, cooking on the fire. And you ask her, why are you not in school? And she says, I can't go to school because my parents they're working on their fields. So I am the one who has to remain at home with the children.
Yes.
So already we're marginalized in terms of education. So the girl child is not going to school, while the boy child might be going to school. And then it starts there, and then at a tender age, she's getting married at 14 years of age. She's already seen as she can't contribute much. So I think we need to address from infancy level to say, how do we make sure that our girl child remains in school?
Yes.
How does she get the same access? Because even when you look at the statistics in terms of the percentage of girls in school, they get less and less as we go up the hierarchy. For myself, I find myself as a farmer, I am attending meetings for policy, for different things, and I find sometimes in the room, I'm the only woman. So something is wrong. So until we start making sure that we have more women on the table, and we see it as normal. You know, like in our culture, I remember like just having a conversation with as a young person myself, even my other young farmers who are men, when we're having conversation, they still feel that there's nothing wrong. So until we say to ourselves, there is something wrong. And you know what? We really need both genders. We need both genders to be able for us to develop Africa, the Africa we want. For us to reduce hunger, we cannot have one gender at policy. We need both genders.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think indeed excluding or giving just a mere place to women in this sector will only undermine what we can do with the sector, with the enormous potential we have on the continent in terms of arable land, but also fertile water, etc. We have everything we need, and yet we don't put all the hands and all the brains and I will say even the heart, as you said, so that we can decide of what to do. And I think as Ramiso said, it starts from down there. We need to empower the future women. At the same time, we empower the future men, so that at the end they play the same role and benefit equally of what we can do. I think it is very critical, and we need to take some decisions or influence some decisions so that we can change that from the root cause, which is that inequality from the tender age. But when we come, let's take a break. When we come, we look at what we need to do to improve the situation indeed.